Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Rebecca Taylor.
So most of us in this room are probably a little bit more keyed into this topic than most people. But when you talk to your family or your relatives and you say, you know, hacking or cybersecurity, what do they think of? They think of, oh, my data was compromised at Target or Home Depot. Or if they're a government employee, yes, OPM was hacked, so now everyone has my details. And yes, these are really, really important breaches that happened. But we in the manufacturing, and especially in aerospace and defense, have another level of concern. We have manufacturing equipment. When this equipment was designed and made, it was made to be productive. It was not made to be secure. And when we look at manufacturing firms today, most of them have grown organically. That means that, you know, as more business came on or became available, you added another machine, or you bought another company off-site, or you acquired a supplier. So this organic growth means that most manufacturers really don't have good visibility into everything that's connected to each other, the machines to each other, facilities to each other, as well as now we have so much data being generated. We're saying to our supply chain, I want to know when my part's coming, so give me visibility. So there's this connection up and down the supply chain and across the enterprise with so much data being produced and analyzed, there are so many vectors that bad actors can get to manufacturers. So our panel today is going to help us try to identify what those challenges are, some tools or ideas for mitigating them, and then how do you protect your enterprise moving forward. So I'm going to invite my panel up. So I'll start with you, Kay. Can you talk a little bit about the specific challenges that defense manufacturers are facing in the cybersecurity area? Is it different from, say, a manufacturer of toys or other products?
Certainly. And thank you, Rebecca, and thank you, everyone, for allowing us to talk about this important subject. A little bit of background. My company has been in business for 21 years. For the past 3 years, we have been working with the issue of cybersecurity in manufacturing. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later this morning at a talk in room 104. So manufacturing networks, as Rebecca stated in her introduction, have become very complex, very connected, and as that has occurred, there are increasing opportunities for adversaries to exfiltrate data from the manufacturing networks. For, as Rebecca said, a toy company, this is one challenge because if your competitor gets your intellectual property, that is an attack really on your marketability, and it's a financial, it can have a financial impact. However, when you're a defense manufacturer, it's a different situation. If our adversaries are able to exfiltrate data from our manufacturing networks, it becomes a national security concern, because not only can our adversaries use the information that they gather to replicate our defense capabilities, but more importantly, they can use that information to develop countermeasures to our technologies. And so that is one area that makes the defense network protection different than normal manufacturing network protection. It's the criticality to national security. The other difference is that in manufacturing for defense, as Alex stated, it's a very structured system that the Department of Defense really has the relationship with the prime integrator. And that prime systems integrator has many, as Alex said, suppliers that provide capabilities to them, and many times they're providing the components, and the information is flowed from the systems integrator down to their suppliers digitally. But the government who is the ultimate customer, does not have a relationship with those smaller suppliers to be able to impact their responsibilities as far as cybersecurity. And the third difference is that the government industry, the government community operates with regulations, and these regulations are created by the Department of Defense, and they impact the prime systems integrator, and that prime integrator has the responsibility to ensure that their suppliers also comply with those regulations. So it's a different kind of a relationship. As Alex said, there's no distributors. It's a different kind of relationship. So when you look at the criticality of the information, the opportunities for that information to be exfiltrated and the impact of that, and then the relationship of the manufacturer to its customer and supply chain, it's a completely different environment.
And Kay, apologies, I didn't give you a chance. I forego the long introductions, but I did want you to have an opportunity to talk about, you know, why are you in this business and what Defined Business Solutions is.
Oh, thank you. My company, Defined Business Solution, we've been in business for 21 years. We've worked all 21 years with manufacturers, particularly in defense manufacturing. And we have more recently worked with government programs to increase their efficiency in their programs, to provide outreach services to them so that people throughout the government understand the capabilities. And then more importantly, recently, we have been focusing on creating opportunities for government and industry collaboration. So for the past 15 months, I've led an effort from the NDIA, the National Defense Industrial Association. It's a collaboration between government and industry to look at the challenge of cybersecurity in the defense industrial base.
Thank you. And Matt, before I get to my question for you, tell us a little bit about the work you're doing at Booz Allen with this whole area of cybersecurity and manufacturers.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Rebecca. Pleasure to be with you all here today, and thank you, Dr. Exer, for kicking us off on the right foot here. I love the quality message here. At Booz Allen, we've been around for about 103 years now, so we've stood the test of time so far, and like us or hate us for it, we created management consulting, I like to say. So sometimes it's a good thing. Maybe sometimes your experiences aren't the same, but I love it, and I have an intense passion for helping bring others new insights. Really what we do, obviously, we have a large contingent in the government space. We serve all across DoD, Intel, civil agencies, bringing some really intense strategy and technology and cybersecurity services to market. My job is to represent the commercial arm of Booz Allen and translating those defense-grade type capabilities and bringing them to commercial organizations, high-tech, aerospace, industrial, automotive type companies. And these days, I spend a lot of my time boots on the ground, hard hat on, goggles on, working the manufacturing floor for cybersecurity issues. It's long been in IT and still has a huge presence and thing to do there, but it's expanding to new environments to include manufacturing and the product itself. So I lead teams of engineers and strategists to help get these hard problems uncovered and discovered and really figured out for clients. So I've had a lot of interesting opportunities to work this problem. You can imagine the types of stakeholders you have to deal with. It's not just plant managers, it certainly includes them, but you've got manufacturing engineering executives, IT architects, security professionals, a lot of different personalities, a lot of different value drivers that make them all go and all tick every single day. So it's a heck of an experience trying to make them all come together. I could go the easy route and say, ooh, scary, fear, uncertainty, doubt. There's so many threats, right? And you guys hear that every day. I'm not going to do that to you. But the fact is, in the manufacturing environment, when we're looking at industrial control systems, connecting to IT as the smart manufacturing journey evolves here, I'll leave you with the idea that the attack surface, as we call it, is just massively, almost exponentially increasing year over year here. And we're doing it for business reasons. I get that. We need the analytics, the ability to port data and improve operations quality and safety. But the other side of that equation is the vulnerability you create for yourself. So With this attack surface, I just want to give the idea of let's be positive for a moment. It's not all scary. If you do this right, and you should do it right, it's about opportunity and growth. This is about, if you do security right, it's about guaranteeing those investments you're making in smart manufacturing for quality and safety and product and customer reasons. Getting these things right, it's about protecting the heart of your business. You want to keep that vital lifeblood flowing. You got to make sure that's continuing to do. It's available, it's up, it's reliable, it's high integrity. And all those things, if I were to leave you with one overarching point, we'll have more today, but is to make sure cybersecurity is an absolute core pillar of your smart manufacturing journey. To bake this in by design, and I'll give you the analogy of a house. When you build a house, the first thing you figure out after the design is you build a foundation so that what you build upon it, all the guts, the analytics, the machinery, the main things that make it impressive and useful is built on something you can trust. So as you go on this glide path over time, think from security at the outset, layer in your analytics, your ability to connect machinery, port things to the cloud, bring the organization culture along, and then you'll start to reach that vision over time. So I'll stamp that as my number one point.
So Matt, I think you've touched on my question, which is, you know, in this audience and at the show, we have a lot of CEOs of small companies and large companies. So if you're sitting in that CEO position, what should your view of cybersecurity for your enterprise be? It seems like it's got to be pretty broad.
That's true, and it's not something that you can't do. I often like to use the analogy in working with boards, or C-suite elements, and start to say it's like a car brake system. Why do you have brakes? It's not so that you can stop. It's so that you can go faster with more confidence. You want to be able to keep moving, and that's the same thing with your business. You want to accelerate, you want to grow, you want to innovate, and outdo your competitive environment. All those things are really key, and the security is what gives you the confidence in order to do that, to do new initiatives like smart manufacturing. I often like to say, look at the whole connected business ecosystem that you have, and the easiest way to visualize this is I say, put yourselves on your plant floor and just look 360. There's a few different stories. If I look to my left, to my value chain, right, and I've got inbound supply networks coming at me, that's a range of concerns. I've got tier 1s, tier 2s that I have to worry about their IT environments, their manufacturing processes, how they're handling their back tier suppliers, and that they've got controls in place. So when I receive their product, I feel pretty good. I can do some tests, I can do some validation, but I need to make sure that they're doing their job so that risk doesn't hit me, it doesn't hit my customers. That's looking left. I look up. IT is now connected into my environment. I am fully enmeshed. IT and OT are like this. We're connecting for business reasons. There's a lot of goodness that be had because of those things. At the same time, we've introduced a broad new attack surface that I need to account for on the architectural side, on the people and process side, and I need to get this done. If I look down, I've got my plant floor. I've got old generation machinery. I've got new generation, very heterogeneous. And to account for all of this, I need to have some very creative ways that I architect so that everything continues to go like I want it, but I'm managing risk and I can feel safe. And then I look to my right and that product goes out the door. I need to feel good that with my name on that product as that company, that I feel good that that customer can trust that I've done a full-scale due diligence, and then they can really embrace what I have as a secure product, a reliable product. It's all about assurance in this sense. The last piece I'll lead on your question with the CEO is, if I'm a CEO, I want to make sure that I've got this operating model, this way of who's doing this job for me, really thought out. I look at it from two perspectives, responsibility and accountability. Ultimately, you need someone accountable for all things cyber these days. You can't have disparate pockets. You need it to roll up to someone who cares about it at the end of the day, whether it's the IT part, manufacturing, needs to roll up. We actually did this recently for General Motors. I can talk about it publicly. We've gotten that statement. But to really create a product security function that wrapped in IT and the manufacturing environment to bring a holistic view on and an accountable entity for looking at how do we do wide, broad-scale, business-wide security practices. And we did that one reason is to buffer the CEO. The CEO is actually looking at it like, hey, the way things are set up, it looks like I'm accountable. We can't have that, so let's put in place a new structure. And the last piece is once you have that accountable entity, you got to make sure you have people that are responsible for doing the work, and they need to have localized domain expertise. Like, I need those process control engineers on the floor to play a role in this, a major role, because they know things that IT doesn't, and vice versa. There's a collaboration and a knowledge exchange there to be had for the good of the enterprise. So to start making those responsibilities distributed out into the enterprise, but rolling up into a broad single accountable entity is really key to getting this job done.
Thank you.
Yep.
And Mark, Chief Cybersecurity Technologist at vArmour. Tell us a little bit about your role there, and then I'll hit you with my question.
So thank you for having me, first off. We've done this tag team a couple of times at several different events over the years. So vArmour, we're a cloud and data center security company. I've moved over to the dark side of a vendor now. I've been operational my entire life. In fact, I wrote my thesis, my graduate thesis, on cybersecurity, on information assurance back in 1994. And for those of you that did that kind of research pre-Google, I have a greater appreciation for how it was to write and do research back then. But that kind of changed my life and moved me into this cybersecurity business. I've been the chief security officer at a number of large organizations, and it kind of prepared me for what I'm doing now. I look at the cloud, I look at where virtualized technology is taking us, and I really do think it is the future of where companies are going. What we're doing, what my company today is doing, is providing a new way of doing security in the cloud. And I truly do believe that the cloud can be a catalyst for better security if we do it appropriately. A couple of things that Alex mentioned, that this zero defects is actually the answer to cybersecurity. Because quite frankly, if we had zero defects in our code, I wouldn't have a job. None of us in this security business would really have a role, because everything I do, every position that I take in over the last 2 decades has really been to combat deficiencies in code. And that zero defects, and this is, I'm not saying that this is something easy. In fact, it is unattainable, I believe. But it is something I think that more companies, especially companies that are developing code products, should be spending more time on. The second thing is, and I've said this for a number of years, quality as a competitive discriminator. I think security can be a competitive discriminator as well. That hasn't proven out yet, but I think there are a number of companies that are building their platform today on being that better security product. And certainly in this industry, in the aerodefense industry, that is critically important. When I got out of the Navy, I went to work for Raytheon, and I was working with Raytheon with Lockheed Martin on a couple of Missile Defense Agency projects. And the quality of our code was so important. And we had, the quality control and the configuration management process that we went through was, by most standards, probably overachieving. But I think that if more companies were doing that today, we'd have less security defects in our code.
So, Mark, you mentioned the cloud. And as more manufacturers are enabling technology which creates this data for analytics, and the enterprises are moving to cloud storage, can you talk about what sort of cybersecurity challenges they might be facing in that type of environment, as opposed to having everything locally on servers?
Yeah. I think, the thing that, and I see this a lot today, is that companies don't really understand what their footprint in the cloud looks like. They assume it's one thing, but in my experience, it's always something different, meaning that they have a much bigger footprint, a much bigger presence in the cloud than they realize. We have been concerned for years about shadow IT, IT that happens in the shadows that the organization doesn't necessarily know about. The cloud has exacerbated that to a huge degree, especially if you're doing development. I see companies and tell them this all the time. If you're doing development, if you have coders in your organization, I promise you they're using the cloud because there's so many efficiencies and so much economic advantage to using information that's already in the cloud rather than recreating it, that they truly are. But going back to what I said earlier, I think that the cloud is a catalyst for better security. And most organizations, if you're a Fortune 500, I have kind of a discriminating factor I call the Fortune 500 and the unfortunate 5,000. The unfortunate 5,000 are companies that simply don't have the resources to devote to security, and whether it's manpower or technology or process, they simply don't have the resources to do what they need to do. The cloud can be that catalyst. The cloud can provide those economic efficiencies done properly, that smaller organizations can really become more efficient without having to devote the resources necessary, especially in manpower resources, to raise the bar of the security bar within their organization. And speaking of manpower resources, if any of you, and most of you probably, have tried to hire or are hiring cybersecurity professionals, it's becoming really, really a challenge. My company's in Silicon Valley, and we always have open requisitions for people. I was the Deputy Undersecretary for Cybersecurity at DHS a couple of years ago, and we were trying to hire people by the hundreds, and we just could not find that kind of talent. So going back to the cloud, I really do think that the cloud is going to be a factor. Cisco put out a report in December that said by 2020, 92% of all compute workload will be done in the cloud. Now that means probably everybody in here is going to be doing something in the cloud in a very, very short period of time. What we need to do is think very strategically about how we're doing that in the cloud. You don't want to put everything out there, but there are some things that make sense that don't necessarily need the kind of trust and control that you do for your on-premises environment.
Thank you, Mark. And I would encourage everyone, if you've got questions for the panel, text AeroDef, text AeroDef to 22333, and the questions will come up here and I can ask the panel. Get the information up there. But in the meantime, we've got in this room manufacturers. So tell us, panel, whoever would like to take it, or all of you, what do you see the most common attack vectors that manufacturers see? I mean, like how are the bad actors getting to manufacturers, and what's their motivation? Like why them and not someone else?
Well, I mean, the most common attack vector continues to be people and phishing. I mean, that's just, it's so easy to get somebody to click on a link, and once you click on a link and you have vulnerabilities within your device, then you're certainly going to get compromised. So that is, that continues to be and probably always will be. Everybody has programs to train their people on best security practices, and that needs to be, we need to continue to do that and maybe do it to a much larger degree than we ever have.
Yeah, I'd add, thinking it from the enablers standpoint, I agree with Mark, the IT route and through spear phishing specifically is a route in, but again, all the connections into the operational production environment, there's just some basic things that aren't being done, and call it basic hygiene. You think about computer security, basic hygiene, the manufacturing workstations, HMI interfaces, things like this aren't being locked down simply. They don't have the right encryption, or they don't have certain kind of access privileges from accessing certain parts of the internet that they shouldn't. The best ones out there are just allowing access to things like technical reference guides of manufacturing equipment producers. Some of them have unfettered access to the internet, and we all know what kind of causes or sort of effects that can lead to. But generally, just looking at closing down, blocking and tackling, plugging basic holes is something that could be done to actually get away from this. And then the other side of it is the suppliers. Suppliers are more and more constructing environments that they can reach in remotely. Even now, some of the big ones, you take like, you've seen like Siemens and GEs out there for good business reasons are making cloud available ways to get that data into the cloud. And you as the business owner can do lots of good things with that, but you have now exited that code, that data outside of your four walls, and now that's another set of concerns. So as the business pushes towards smart manufacturing, we just need to continue to balance those holes that we create for ourselves.
And I think that I agree with both of your statements, and I think part of what we've struggled with looking at cybersecurity in the defense industrial base, particularly in the manufacturing networks, there's really three main differences between cybersecurity in manufacturing and cybersecurity in IT or enterprise networks. And I think most of the cybersecurity solutions and analysis and even training has been geared towards the enterprise architectures, information technology networks, and they don't, there hasn't been a good effort. There are some being developed now, but until recently, there hasn't been a good effort to develop specific cybersecurity for manufacturing networks to deal with things like the life of manufacturing equipment. These are concentrated, well-planned capital investments that the manufacturing equipment is designed and expected to last 15 to 20 years. Security changes a lot during that period of time. It's not like buying the servers for your IT network that is expected to be replaced every 2, 5, 7 years. It's the equipment life that is different. It's the different in the mindset. In your IT environment, you can have your equipment turned off, your network disabled to install patches and other security upgrades. In manufacturing networks, as I'm sure most of you in this room know, the goal is to get it continually working 24/7. There is limited opportunity to install the patches and the security upgrades that are really necessary to keep the network secure. And then as we were talking about with the training to date has mostly been focused on people in the enterprise part of the business, the people who work with the IT networks and access the business processes. There has been less cybersecurity training for the manufacturing floor, really designed for manufacturing mindset, manufacturing realities. And so then you end up with some of the cyber hygiene. People talk all the time about going into a shop floor and seeing a password for a piece of equipment taped to the piece of equipment. Well, that's a real problem, but it's not done just because the operator couldn't remember the password. One of the motivations for doing that is that there could become a time when someone other than the operator has to get into that machine if there's a problem. The ability to access the machine may be needed by more than just the primary operator. So these are some of the things. In short, it is that cybersecurity has been really developed and communicated. The solutions for the enterprise network, we need to start developing cybersecurity that is specific to the manufacturing network.
Thank you. We're getting some great questions, so let me get to some of them. And this is something that I think we see everywhere. So as cyber and the use of technology in the manufacturing environment continues to evolve, so does the ability of bad actors to meet that evolution of the new technology and the new protections. So if you're a manufacturer and you say, okay, I'm secure, but you know you're only secure until somebody figures out how to get in, how do you even begin to try to plan for that?
Can I start by changing the mindset of what is bad? So I'd ask everyone that I work with, I'd say, what is an unacceptable event for you? What is an impact that you just say it crossed the line? Because there are, like, take the DoD networks, there's hundreds of thousands of events and kind of pings and people trying to get in across DoD networks across the world today. They sometimes get in, sometimes they get blocked. Not all of them are bad. Maybe just a few of them are bad every day. Same thing in manufacturing. Despite the fact that someone hacked in and even got down to potentially like a manufacturing workstation or just some sort of general IT console in that environment, is it bad? Well, figure it out. Does it control a critical process? Did it lead to something bad? Did they execute some sort of malware that stopped production? And start to understand all the way down to business impact what is bad, and then you can start to say all hacks, they're going to happen. They're just going to happen. The attack surface is huge, but start to ask yourself that question of what is a bad business impact? And you likely already understand what that is today from the quality and safety world. Cybersecurity or cyber attacks are just another trigger of a potential bad event. So start to see what those bad events are and if they were caused by cyber. That'll start to give you a more real view of how to prioritize what's hitting you and what to care about.
Anybody else?
Yeah, so I think jumping right on that bandwagon, I worked in the electricity industry for a number of years, and the thing that we hung our hat on every day was resilience. We knew that bad things were going to happen. We knew that storms were going to come through and tear down power lines. We planned for those things. And the resilience is the ability to deal with an event. You know it's going to happen. It's going to be when you least expect it to happen, but it's going to happen. But being able to continue to operate in an environment where something bad has happened is really important. It's important for the strategic planning of an organization, because these events happen, and I've worked as a consultant, worked with companies in mitigating and recovering from a cyber event, and when they haven't thought about these things in advance, sometimes they go out of business because there's just not time to recover and maintain your operational environment. So resilience is absolutely key in any kind of a control system environment. As you mentioned, availability. You know, in the IT world, the CIA triad of cybersecurity is confidentiality, availability, and integrity. In IT, confidentiality and integrity are most important. In most control system organizations, availability is the most important. You don't ever take these systems down. So thinking about resilience in your organization, how you're going to deal with unexpected events, is critically important for staying in business.
And I'd like to tag on to something Mark said earlier. We're looking with the joint working group, the DoD Industry Joint Working Group. We are really intrigued by security as a service, as Mark said, and the benefits of using some kind of cloud solution or a hybrid cloud solution that would take the responsibility from the small and medium manufacturers for their security to a different level and provide that expertise as a service to them that they wouldn't have to fund in-house.
Right. So I'm going to combine a couple of the questions that came in, and it's all around, so you've got your manufacturing company, you understand the importance of cybersecurity, you've kind of got buy-in from your higher level management, and your IT folks say, cyber's mine, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to lock down all of your equipment, we're going to make data unavailable, so now we're secure. But obviously that doesn't really work for productivity. So if you're the manufacturer on the OT side, not the IT side, how do you get that sort of kumbaya moment where we say, okay, we need to be secure enough, but we still need to be able to do our jobs?
Well, there is no kumbaya moment. You know, there's no such thing as as being 100% secure. I mean, even if you wanted to, there's not. You can't do that. But you know, and those of us in the security business have long had the reputation of being an inhibitor to good operations. So there's a point in an organization where you do have to say, good enough is good enough. And you've done all of your static processes. You've done all of the kind of the normal hygiene kind of things. And you've built the resilience. You've thought about, okay, if bad things are going to happen, here's what I would do. Because they are going to happen. I mean, and it's a simple fact of life. You're never going to get around to saying that I am completely secure and that we have nothing to worry about in this organization, because cybersecurity is very dynamic, and we just saw from what happened yesterday with WikiLeaks and the CIA. I mean, even organizations like the CIA, who probably undoubtedly spend more on security than any other organization in the world besides one other one, they just had a big security event, and that kind of thing can happen in any organization.
I'd add on that note, bringing the two sides together, the manufacturing and the IT sides. I've been in many workshops trying to facilitate this dialogue, the kumbaya goal. I've had heated arguments. I've had people say, you don't know me, and they walk right out of the room. But progress is usually made, and we get to the point of having that very clear understanding of, at the very minimum, what does it mean for process control to go? What is true uptime? What would a recovery time objective look like if something were to go down? You start to give those parameters to IT, and they say, okay, we can work with that. We can start to architect solutions that protect you enough, but don't lock you down and keep you from doing even like break glass operations to stop production if it needs to be. But coming to that consensus on why you're doing it in a shared fashion, the first thing that I always think comes about is you get a joint working structure, sometimes a formal organization, and then they meld together, they embed with each other, and then they start looking at it from one view rather than disparate sides of the house. Seen a lot of progress in that way.
Well, this leads into my next question, which reminds me of this cartoon that I saw. It's a boxing ring, and they have, in this corner, we've got the latest cybersecurity protections protocols, hardware, software, and in this corner, we got Bob. Well, and the question is, so when you look at your employees, and we talked about who's responsible for cybersecurity, and then the question is, so how do I instill this culture that everybody is? It's not the cyber guys or the IT guys, it's everybody, because your employees can be your first line of defense, or they can be the one opening the front door.
Right.
So how do you deal with that?
And one of the things that we're looking at for the Department of Defense particularly is awareness campaigns that would have spread the awareness of the cyber risks throughout the organization. And many of you who have been in the defense business for many years remember some of the awareness campaigns, the quality campaigns, the FUD, those kinds of awareness initiatives that were in the Department of Defense. Of course, many of us, if not most of us, have heard of the Loose Lips Sink Ship campaign that was really based on intelligence that was from the World War II era. So we're looking at developing awareness campaigns for the defense industrial base, just so the whole question of cybersecurity and the responsibility for cybersecurity is throughout the organization. Like Alex said about quality, it is one person responsible, but everybody has a role.
Well, you know, as much as I hate to say this, we're never going to train this out of our employees. I've had people in some organizations, there's always somebody that's going to do this wrong thing every single time. Just count on it. That's that unmitigatable circumstance. And I think the way to approach this, so I sit on several boards and I advise several companies. The CEO needs to be responsible. And somebody said it earlier today. CEO needs to set the tone for the organization. If the CEO doesn't buy into this, no one else in the company is going to buy into it. It simply is not going to happen. And for the longest time, this chief security officer has had the responsibility, and the CEO said, that's Mark's job. He'll take care of that. And you know, over the last couple of years, I've been pushing back and saying, no, it's not my responsibility. It's actually your responsibility. I think we've given boards and CEOs a pass for too long when they say, oh, that cyber stuff's too complicated, too sophisticated, I don't understand it. Baloney. The CEO needs to set the tone for this. We can't expect every employee to accept the responsibility for security if the leadership of the organization is not setting the right kind of an example.
And increasingly, auditors are looking at the cyber hygiene and training and the plans that a company has in order to pass an audit. So I think it does need to be at the CEO level, but it flows down because the employees can be the best protection.
So another simple analogy, you can walk on any plant floor in any company in the world. There's a sign somewhere that says, you know, safety, you know, number of days since the last accident or something like that. Security needs to have that, it needs to be ingrained in a culture the way safety has been ingrained in our manufacturing cultures over the years. And we simply aren't there yet. But I do think that we're moving in that direction where security is becoming that big of an issue that leadership of organizations are starting to take that kind of a tone internally.
Yeah. On that note, Mark, I've actually seen an effective where everyone believes in the safety element as it is today, and if you loop in and embed security into that organization's function and messaging and let them be the catalyst for moving this out rather than living to the side, this can get a lot more quick resonance.
Yep, good idea.
So we often hear that if you haven't been hacked, it's just because you haven't been hacked yet or you don't know you've been hacked. And so one of the questions that came from the audience is it true that every enterprise has been compromised at some level? And if that's the case, do you go in and fix the problem? Or what should your next action be if you say, okay, yep, that's not right. What next? And is it true that it's everybody?
Well, the answer is yes. I mean, in my experience, 100% of the companies that I talk to have been compromised in some way, shape, or form. In fact, I work with a number of white hat hacking companies, and they tell me that they have a 100% success rate in getting into a control system environment if they can compromise the business environment of a company. So that that kind of exploits the mythology that there's still an air gap between your control system environment and your business environment. And so, well, I'll let somebody else jump on that.
Go ahead.
Just to put it in perspective, in 2015, the IBM Cybersecurity Group that monitors cyber attacks had manufacturing industry as the #2 targeted industry for cyber attacks, second only to healthcare. So manufacturing is an inviting target for not only our adversaries for the Department of Defense, but for the commercial hackers as well.
Yeah, and I just want to point out that for, manufacturers often say, I make bolts or I make fasteners, who's going to want to hack me? And the answer is everybody, because not only do you have information about your product, your supply chain, your customers, you have employee information, you might have IP, and in the very basis, let's just say that you don't really have anything that anybody wants, you have servers. And we hear stories where companies were targeted not because of what they made or their data, but they were piggybacking on their servers for the bad actors to then go out and do other things. So when they would trace it back, it would say, oh, that's, you know, Bob's Fastener Company. It's certainly not the Chinese. So just be aware that they're coming from all sides, and they're coming at you no matter what whether you think you've got something valuable or not.
And if you think about that, Rebecca, from a supply chain perspective, I'm a fastener company. No one's going to hack me. I've got nothing big. But think of your customer 2-3 tiers down the stream. Maybe it's an airplane manufacturer that really cares about that fastener being just so precise so that it holds $100 million together. That's a target. That's a target that if I can just do a few microns changes to the way that thing is built and that cascades downstream, that can create lots of problems, and that might achieve the objective they're going for. So that's why, whether you're upstream or downstream in the supply chain, you all have a role in seeing how the end product, your brand name, all plays out in the end.
Go ahead.
So you may have heard of the DEN attack in November, and DEN was they're a DNS provider, and to the point of everybody should be concerned about this. DEN was basically it was an IoT attack where they compromised cameras and DVR recorders from physical security devices globally. They exploited a vulnerability in these devices around the world, used them as a massive DDoS attack against DEN. And DEN was a provider of to thousands of other companies, took them offline, and every company, I mean, there are thousands of companies that were compromised. Their devices in their organizations were part of this global botnet that attacked DEN and took DEN down. So there is a role for, there's a role that everybody plays in this, and this IoT and IIoT is only going to get more complex. If we don't, and this goes to the heart of everybody in here today, if we don't start thinking about building security into our products, those products are going to be used against us and against other people.
So this goes more to the end product cybersecurity, but one of the questions was, is it realistic to think that through a cyber attack you could bring down an airplane or a jet fighter? I think I know the answer, but I want to hear from the smart people on my panel.
So I'll start and say it's realistic, it's possible. With the quality processes that exist today, I wouldn't say it's the most probable thing. There's a lot of validation on how those things are done. But you've got to think back. Bringing it down might entail something where we put in a weak part, and over time that thing wears down and breaks, right? It's not necessarily I'm on a plane, I'm hacking it, I go through the Wi-Fi system, and I can now take control of the plane. That's a very different scenario with which there are very good controls. But it's certainly possible, and I think the more motivated attackers get, and they get more and more motivated every day, they come from lots of backgrounds and reasons why they operate, I think everything's possible in that sense.
I'd like to give two answers. The first is there was work done at Virginia Tech to do exactly what was just mentioned about changing the code, the manufacturing production code that made a part, and it was a wing part to a drone that introduced a weakness into that part that could not be detected through the quality and testing process, but would ensure that the wing failed prematurely and would impact mission success. So there was a test done at Virginia Tech with that problem. The second answer I would give to that is in 2015, Patriot missiles that were sold from the US to Germany, as they were on base, their controllers started being operated by an unauthorized entity. Of course, much of the information about that attack is classified and not publicly disclosed, but there was an article about the attack in a European publication similar to Newsweek that speculated that it was a cyber attack to take over the control of the Patriot missiles. So yes, that was a documented attack similar to that.
So the answer, I think, is yes, given certain parameters. And I worry about it more from the integrity aspect of security. When you used to see pilots, when they would walk on an airplane, they had a flight bag that looked like a suitcase. And today they still carry a flight bag, but most of their flight plans are on an iPad, which they just downloaded, an hour before the flight. And so the ability to affect the integrity of the flight plans could be incredibly damaging to the ability of that pilot to know what they were doing. So several companies have done a number of research on this, on how it could be exploited, and the fact is it can be exploited. So I worry more about it from that perspective than perhaps from the manufacturing perspective.
So another question from the audience. What is the biggest myth or the most significant oversight you see in cybersecurity in the manufacturing sector?
Air gap.
Yeah. Air gap.
So for those in the audience that don't quite understand that, can you explain that?
Sure. I mean, in the old days, there was a very real air gap. There was a fine distinction between the control system environment or your SCADA environment and your business environment and IT environment. And over the years, just through the efficiencies of technology and the economics of being able to share information back and forth, there's no longer an air gap. I mean, there are sometimes hard-coded or hard-line connectivity between these two environments. And because the IT networks are typically connected directly to the internet, every bit of nasty stuff that happens out on the internet can effectively be transferred over to your control system environment. And even more control system environments are now being connected to the internet as well. So creating the firewalls and the security devices between these two environments is becoming more and more important.
And go ahead.
Go ahead, please.
I'll give you a real example of that air gap problem. Even for a regulated industry, which you think has more stringent controls and operations, worked for an oil and gas company, and we, on a Friday, we drove up to the outside of that plant, and wirelessly we're able to capture some credentials, a set of IT credentials, just for an administrative worker in that building. Next day we came back, used some methods to get in when no one was there, and we pivoted all the way down through various routes, got to the PLCs, got control down to the source code of the PLCs, just that simply. It was not hard. The air gaps didn't exist. They thought they weren't that connected to the IT network from like a pipes perspective and underground fiber in that sense. We were able to capture some credentials and make our way down in less than 24 hours.
Wow. And I'll say that for me, looking at this problem for the past 3 years, the biggest myth that I see is that companies think that technology can solve the problem. Going to Rebecca's cartoon illustration earlier, as long as you have people in the system, technology is never going to be enough alone. You're never going to find a technology solution that will solve the problem if you have people in the picture.
Go ahead, Mark.
Actually, real briefly, one other, I think, a myth is perimeter security. Over the years, we've invested gazillions of dollars in our perimeters to keep bad guys out and even, in fact, in some cases, keep stuff from leaving our organizations. But, Stuxnet was the first example of how, maybe not the first example, it was the first example of a cyber event resulting in physical damage to an organization, and that was caused by a thumb drive, which literally circumvented the entire perimeter security process. And that thing can happen literally in almost any organization today. So having the other kind, so not to say you want to neglect your perimeter security, but you need to have other security controls inside to detect and deflect some of these other avenues of vulnerability.
So we're near the end of our time. I want to read one last comment that just came in. Awesome panel. And I would agree with that. I've worked with my colleagues here for years on various cybersecurity projects. I would say, you know, take advantage of their expertise and their being here in person, because their time is pretty valuable, and we're lucky to have them here today. I want to thank you personally for making the trip and for contributing your knowledge. As aerospace and defense manufacturers produce items and equipment for the warfighter and to protect our nation, the cybersecurity is so critical. So thank you all for spending the time with us to learn a little bit more, and I encourage you to follow up with our panel afterwards. Thank you.